All right. This is a very exciting one for me. I've been wanting to talk to this man for pretty much 2 decades. Way back in the day, I used to visit stormwrestling.com almost on a daily basis. Of course, run at one time, I believe the newsletter was by the great John Pollock. I would read all the updates, the diaries, all that stuff, and more the book reviews. And I've long been a fan of Lance Storms, one of the greatest Canadian professional wrestlers of all time, the pride now of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Have to pause there, of course. Former ECW great, WCW great, and of course WWE great. Kind enough to join us on the program. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing all right. On the mend, just recovering from COVID. But yeah, Jeff Merrick was the one who convinced me to have an online presence with a website back in, I think, October, November of 98, 99, somewhere 23, 24 years ago.
Right. And most importantly, I hope you're feeling better. Thank you for doing this under these conditions. I appreciate it. I know what it feels like. I actually wanted to start there because, like I said, I've been watching you for so many years. Massive admirer of yours. You've represented Canada on the biggest stage, and I love that. But you were one of the first guys, at least for me as a fan, 98, 99, I'm 16, 17, really getting into, the Attitude Era and all that, who had an online presence, who allowed us to kind of see behind the curtain, so to speak. And I was wondering about the genesis of that. So it was the great Jeff Marek who convinced you, and then it wasn't just like you were doing this, at least from my vantage point, begrudgingly. You really dove into this, and the updates were very constant. It seemed like it was a real passion project for you, right?
Yeah, I'm an all or nothing guy. I was doing off the record on TSN with Michael Landsberg,
Hmm.
and Jeff was his wrestling research guy whenever he had a wrestler on. And Jeff came and we sat in the green room and he was trying to convince me that, this internet, this World Wide Web is something you should be on. And live audio wrestling had started theirs, and they were doing, they wanted to launch wrestling websites, and they had convinced Dynamite and I think Trish were on, and he was trying to convince me to do it. And he managed to. And since I'm an all or nothing guy, it's like, okay, I'm doing this. And we had a weekly podcast that you could listen to if you had Real Player on your computer, for those that are old enough to remember Real Player. And I did like a 15, 20-minute podcast with Jeff every week. And I posted a weekly commentary. And again, I was religious with it. Every single week, I wrote an article about something and posted it on my website, and it took off.
It was great. I was wondering if you ever got, I don't know, in trouble or something. You spoke about stuff going on backstage. Did anyone ever get mad at you for anything that you wrote?
I don't think so. No, like someone probably did, but I think I know Vince once actually pulled me aside and put over something I had wrote.
Wow.
And I assume someone pointed it out to him. I can't fathom that he had enough time to read my weekly column, but it was actually, and my stance has changed since, but it was when Canada was debating on legalizing marijuana. And I'm like, we've got DUIs and everything all over. Do we really need another means by which to impair people? And it was at the time a anti-legalizing pot commentary. And he pulled me aside and was, super anti-pot and good article. And I really like it, pal.
Wow.
And yes, and I was just like, he read this, and I'm assuming someone thought he would like it and suggested he read it. But I don't recall anyone that I know. Actually, Bubba once, and it wasn't a. I had wrote something about something he had done in TNA, and someone, I think it was from the Torch, had a negative stance on his segment and used a portion of my article to back it up, but wrote it in a way that many of his points seemed to be credited to me. And Bubba reached out to me privately, to his credit, with a, dude, what the hell? It's like, I thought we were friends. This seems really unfair. And he sent me the link and I read it and I'm like, I didn't say this. And I read the article. And I emailed or text or however he reached out back. And I'm like, read this carefully, dude. Here's the link to what I wrote. This dude is misrepresenting it. And he just got back to me. He's like, all right, that's fair. My apologies. And it's like, I really credited Bubba for being someone that didn't just turn it into an online
Right.
fight, because this was obviously probably in the 2000s, where, internet fights and pettiness could really take off. And he just reached out personally with, this is kind of unfair, isn't it? And I told him what I actually said. And he's like, oh, okay, that's fair. And then there was no heat. So credit to Bubba for being professional.
Well, I'm happy that the site is still around. I just looked it up, although I don't think it has been updated in several years. But it looks the exact same, the same layout and everything.
It was changed once.
Okay, well, at least
There
from
was,
what I remember.
yeah, because the live audio wrestling guys designed it at first, and they were paying the server charges and all the hosting fees and stuff. And somewhere, I don't remember the year, emailed me with, we can no longer cover these costs. You're going to have to, and take it over yourself. And I'm like, oh, crap. And I think I reached out. There was a fan that I knew from the site that had a fan site for me. Huh. And I reached out to him with, would you be interested in actually hosting the real one? Because I don't have the ability to design a site. And I paid for the server hosting, whatever the heck you call it. And that fan designed the site for me. So it had a very big layout change at that time. And actually, that guy ended up later on coming to my school and as a student.
Wow.
Yeah, he reached out and wanted to train. And I'm like, I'll give you the 100% web designer discount.
Yeah. Well, I had great memories in college of anytime something big happened, when the sale happened, WCW, refreshing to see what your take was, because it was always unfiltered and honest. So I wanted to bring that up. That's how far back I go. In fact, I think we've met once before in person. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I was backstage at Raw right before the pandemic. For some weird reason, I still don't really understand why. I was invited to go backstage, and Triple H was very, very kind to me and showed me all around, and you were there, and I was very excited to meet you. We spoke very briefly. You were working as a producer, and then literally a week later, everything shuts down, and unfortunately, soon thereafter, you parted ways with WWE just months after joining. Could we start there? Could I ask you about the time that you had in WWE, and do you think if there, some alternate universe, there is no pandemic, you're still with them a couple years later?
I would imagine I'd still be with them, because I'm an all or nothing guy. And it's like, I made a commitment to go back there and do the job. I was doing the job. I think I was good at it. And for the most part, I enjoyed it. Like, there was a lot of stress and things that annoyed me about the structure and the way it was. But with WWE, and it was the same way as a wrestler, when you're on that treadmill of just getting the job done, that you never have a chance to sit back and reflect. And it's like, you do the job. And it was the same thing when I was a wrestler, you're just doing it. And then when you actually leave the roster, you sit back and go, why the hell was I doing that? Like, it was so busy and so stressful. But I would imagine I'd have finished up. I think we're now at the point where I think I signed a 3-year deal. Like, I think it would be expiring now.
End of the year, right? I think it was like November or something.
Yeah, I started 1st of December 99. So yeah, I'd be, I guess, debating on whether I re-sign up or not.
Did you enjoy it?
For the most part, yes. Again, reflecting back, there's a lot of the structure and, let's call it, nonsense that I, in hindsight, find frustrating, especially now that I'm with Impact and have a different view on how some aspects of the job can be done. But on the whole, like, I've always liked the people there. I've always got along with them. Like, you always hear horror stories about Johnny Ace, but it's like, I've known Johnny Ace since, God, I think I first talked to him the end of 94 about going to All Japan with Chris Candido after Smoky Mountain. And we debuted in WCW together. So we've always worked together, and I've always got along with them. And the talent was great to work with, and the producers were good. So I probably would have stayed and enjoyed it, because there was a lot of great people.
At that point, it had been several years since you worked for them, since you competed for them. Who was the one that convinced you to come back, or at least reached out to you and offered you this?
I reached out to them.
Really?
I had decided it was time to shut my school down.
Why?
I'm a very hands-on trainer, and it was becoming physically too demanding for me, because I have to be the one in the ring with everybody doing things. And I believe one of the big aspects of my the appeal of my school was that I have a match with every student that comes through my door, provided they make it to the end. It's like, you wrestle with Lance Storm when you come to Storm Wrestling Academy. And that was becoming more physically demanding. So I was like, okay, I think I need to wrap this up. So I reached out to, I think it was William Regal first, just with, I'm curious if there'd be interest, what my options might be. I'm looking at shutting the school down, and he put me in touch with Johnny Ace, and Johnny Ace, I think he reached out to Johnny, and Johnny immediately called me back and basically offered me a gig.
Wow.
And it was funny because it was, I think, the beginning of the summer, end of the spring, when I was looking at, planning ahead, because I've got, sessions booked to the end of 2019. I figured, well, I could maybe look into starting in 2020. And Johnny, basically calls back, makes me an offer. I'm like, oh, that sounds really good. He's like, all right, well, you can start next week. And I'm like, hang on, John. I have another, I can't. And I was wanting to start January 1st. My session ended the end of November. I'm like, I'd like to have a month to chill.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, we need to get you started right away. So it was literally, I shut the school down on a Friday and flew out on Sunday to do my first Raw on a Monday.
Wow.
And it was that fast. Yeah.
And when you were let go, did they say this is just temporary? This is a furlough. You'll be back. What was said to you?
Well, we had a, town hall meeting where you get I think it was an email that just said everybody can sign into this virtual meeting. And Vince had there's the pandemic, we're shutting down. There will be some people furloughed, some people let go. You'll get an email if you're one of those that are getting let go. And then I didn't get one. And I thought for sure, because I had already told Johnny, I can't cross the border.
Right.
I have to stay home. And I didn't get an email. And then I think it was the next day I got a phone call from John. And I really appreciate the fact that he gave me a phone call. And it was, again, I was in a bit of a different situation in that other producers were just hired. I had to get a contract. I had to get a visa. So I had a different situation than them. And he was, we're going to furlough / let you go. There really is no difference. But because of my contract, I had to be fired so that the contract had to be terminated, because otherwise they legally have to pay me. But because of that, I was really fortunate. I had a 90-day. So, I stayed home. I think March 20th was my last trip. It was in April that this decision was made. And then I had another 3 months of being paid. So I ended up, sitting home, I think for 4 months getting paid at least. But Johnny did say, when things get better, we hope to bring you back, but who knows? And at that point in time, I started, figuring that I was done. We'll start afresh if things settle down. And by the time things settled down, I was looking for something else.
When things kind of got back a little bit to normal in this world, and they were back on the road, did you reach out to them before the Impact deal came through?
No. I had talked to Scott and Don. I think Don was still with Impact when I first started talking with them, and started having when I'm comfortable traveling again, I do want to go back to work. And I had done a couple of producer gigs for Impact, more as a favor to Don. I went in and did a guest ref thing for Rebellion in Toronto, the Johnny Impact versus Brian Cage title match. So I had done, I think, 2 or 3, Toronto and Windsor tapings as a producer for them. So I had a degree of experience with Impact, and it's like, I just liked it better. And when I reached out to WWE the first time was at that time. So I talked to Don about what they would offer, and they were interested, but WWE came back with a really good offer. And my wife was interested in the safer offer with the security of WWE. So I just went to WWE. And the irony is that if I'd went to Impact, I wouldn't have gotten fired. So Impact was the more secure spot. But at that point, I realized, and I think I did an interview and mentioned this, but I know I said it to Scott. I think this is my chance to make the decision I should have made in the first place. I I, I enjoyed myself so much better in Impact. I found the atmosphere more enjoyable and more relaxed. And so when it was looking time, I reached out to Scott and he made me an offer. And I'm like, this sounds really good. I want to go where I want to go, not where I think I should go. And I've been loving it so far.
And specifically, your role is backstage producer?
Mainly, I consider it producer coach in
Okay.
that I had offered to Scott that again, I was doing virtual training via Zoom, um, coaching as a a side gig during the pandemic. And the wrestlers that I was doing it with really found value in it, and I found it really rewarding. So I offered to provide that type of coaching as well. So when I'm at the shows, I'm a producer, but I also watch every show back, every match back, and offer coaching feedback to the talent after the fact. And again, many have found it really rewarding. And I think it's something I realized even just when I opened my school that, again, it goes back to that treadmill. When you're just working all the time, you never have a chance to just sit back and watch what you did and fix the little things that you know you should if you actually had time to think about it. And I'm that third set of eyes that can sit back and go, hey, you really could have paused here and got a better reaction. The fact that you went this way, it really cut down on your reaction. This might make more sense. So I watch the matches, make my notes, and then send them to the talent, and it gives them a chance to reflect a bit. And I think on the whole, over time, it'll improve everyone's work because that's something that I noticed when I opened my school. It's like you look back on your stuff and it's like there's a lot of little mistakes. I don't know if mistake's the right word, but things that you could do so much better if you weren't so busy with the next booking, the next booking, the next booking. And I'm producer coach, for lack of a different term.
All right, we're going to get back to that conversation in a moment, but right now I do want to tell you about our good friends over at NordVPN. We love NordVPN. I love NordVPN. I use NordVPN quite often. Let me tell you about them. So, as you know, in the world of sports, if you're a sports fan, it can be difficult to watch your favorite events based on where you call home. But with a service like NordVPN, that difficulty goes away. Listen to this, with just one click, you can change your virtual location so that you don't miss your event, even when abroad. You can find a server near you for better speed or connect to a faraway location to freely explore the internet. NordVPN is the fastest VPN out there, and you can watch your favorite events without any interruption. You could use it on up to 6 devices, even on your smart TV. And best of all, NordVPN lets you use the top streaming platforms at a lower price. Last summer, I was in Canada for a month. We had to do the whole quarantine thing. It was a mess of a situation. And there were a lot of events that I needed to watch. I needed to watch my ESPN Plus. I needed to watch my Peacock. I needed to watch my DAZN. I needed to watch my HBO Max. Space Jam had just come out. What did I do? Signed up for NordVPN, and voila, click of a button, I'm back home. I'm able to watch everything like I would if I was back home in the United States. It was perfect, crystal clear quality. It saved me because I was legit nervous about how I would watch all these fights, events, shows, movies, and I didn't miss a beat, all thanks to NordVPN. So I want you right now to grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/Ariel to get a huge discount off of your NordVPN plan, plus free threat protection, plus one additional month for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Again, that's nordvpn.com/Ariel. I ain't kayfabing you right now. It's legit. I've used it. It's the best that I've ever tried. If you're in a tough spot and you need to watch an event, wherever you may be, you need to watch something, wherever you may be, you need to stream something, wherever you may be, go to nordvpn.com/Ariel. How do you feel about the state right now of pro wrestling? AEW is doing their thing, WWE is doing their thing, and I'd love to ask you specifically about them as well. But Impact enjoying somewhat of a renaissance, I think. I think some people thought they were dead at one point. Now here they are, um, with a new ownership group, and there's obviously the international scene as well. How do you feel about the current state of the business?
It's both great and frustrating, I think, in that there's so much of it,
Hmm.
which is what I like least about the business currently is there's just so much product. And I don't think it's just wrestling. I think entertainment in general, whatever it is, we have our fan base. Let's give them as much as they'll take and get as much back from them financially as we can. That like there's so much WWE product and there's a lot of AEW product and there's a lot of wrestling product. Like if you wanted to watch all of WWE, it's like you've got your what seven, you count NXT 7 hours a week plus specials plus, if you actually wanted to watch like main event, which still exists, that's so much. And AEW, you've got your 3 hours, but if you want to watch Dark and Elevation, it's like that's got to be what 7, 8 hours a week. And being a fan of anything is just so damn time consuming now. And I think that's why, and it's a real shame because I think Impact's product is really good. And its biggest hurdle is not enough eyeballs. And, if you watch the show, the biggest detriment to the show is we don't have the big, large, lively crowds, but it's like the product itself is really good. And I think we are a victim of so much content that, if you're a wrestling fan, obviously, WWE is the McDonald's of the wrestling business. And it's like everybody knows about that and watches it. And it's like, then there's all those people that, again, if you want to say, AEW is Burger King, just to make an analogy, someone will probably take offense to that. And it's like, that's a lot of more content. And it's like, we're that third or fourth, depending on whether you want to count New Japan or Mexico or whatever. And it's just hard to get eyeballs. And it's a shame. And I remember as a fan, you're probably the same. I'm older than you, but you're not 21. It was, I want more. I want more. Where can I find more? Because, 2 hours of squash matches on Saturday has not fulfilled my desire. And now it's like, you've got a 27 course meal and it's like, I'm full, even though there's a really good meal coming again. And so I think that's frustrating, but for accessibility and variety as a fan, if you're willing to pick, and maybe that again goes back to my all or nothing mentality, if you're willing to just pick the part that you like the best, it's like there's a hell of a smorgasbord here.
Too much of a good thing isn't always a good thing. I remember Maple Leaf Wrestling back in the day, and that was a great like 1 hour appetizer. But then you're starving for more. Now it's just almost, 24 hours a day. You have one of the best minds, like I said. The website, kind of introduced me to this. So I'd love to get your take on two particular things. What do you make of what is going on at WWE? Triple H less involved now. Stephanie taking a leave of absence. Feels like something is going on there, right? And I'd love to know what you make of it all.
Again, I'm guessing,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I'm just your
I
read on the
wouldn't be
situation.
I wouldn't be surprised with Steph and Hunter that they're falling victims to the all or nothing mentality.
Mm.
And when you're in WWE, man, you're in WWE, and it's a 24/7 lifestyle. And I can see where Hunter led that 24/7 lifestyle, and he's got a family that he's got to try to be a part of as well. That he rode that until he almost physically broke. He had the heart issue and had to go, I got to stop. And maybe stopping and getting away, maybe Steph and him realize that maybe 24/7 at work isn't the best thing for us. And I believe Hunter is coming back and doing more, and maybe Steph decided, you know what, Hunter had however long he had off. I don't know what it was. Like maybe she's like, I need that too. And, we've seen it, when Jericho just, ages ago went, I got to get the hell out of here. And he left for 2 years. And when he came back, he was so rejuvenated. And with anyone. Serena D, bless the wrestling business, became a coach for a while, and she goes back. She's freaking awesome. And I think that, Shawn Michaels, when he left for however many years and came back, he was so much better. I think there's something to taking a step back and realizing that you can't stay on that treadmill forever. Vince seems to be the only one that can do it, but Vince is like PCO. He isn't human.
So you don't buy into this whole like political struggle and they're losing out on that battle behind the scenes. It's being sold. There's any of that stuff.
I don't have enough knowledge to have an opinion on that. Like, it's possible, but it's like, I don't see anyone that could take over Vince's job better than Hunter. Like, you can use the NXT experiment, if you will, but it's like, if Vince was given the NXT experience, I think he would have fared less successfully than Hunter did.
The Sasha Naomi story, is this a work or a shoot?
I believe it's a shoot. I just don't think we have the real story. Like, I can't fathom this being strictly over the creative of they were going to have a singles program and they want to be in a tag team. Like, that just isn't enough for me to believe that they walked out over that. Like, maybe there was a dispute over that led to other frustrations that, was the straw that broke the camel's back. But I just can't fathom we don't want to do this 6-person match and then singles programs the next pay-per-view. We're leaving. Like, I just don't buy that. I know Sasha a little bit. I don't really know Naomi, but it's like, that's just way too irrational to me.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be something more. And until I know what that more is, I can't really pass judgment on it. But I don't believe for a second it's a work.
Just as a viewer and knowing how the business works, how do you feel about how they are handling it? The thing that Michael Cole said on Friday, he's getting some heat for that, calling them unprofessional and letting people, just the way, it's reminiscent, at least to me. And I think you were there at the time when Stone Cold didn't want to lose to Brock and they said he took his ball and went home. It's reminiscent. I wouldn't dare compare, with all due respect to Sasha and Naomi, compare them to Stone Cold, but it feels the same where they're kind of peeling back the curtain a little bit and telling you this person did something that we didn't like, and thus we are punishing them for it.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of it, but like I specifically watched SmackDown to see the Cole announcement, and it's like, it didn't seem that harsh to me. And it's something that I think could very easily be turned into an angle in a program if and when this gets worked out. Like, WWE as a company has been the heel that badmouths talent forever, just as an on-camera storyline. You know what I mean? It's like, Vince has been a heel in the Austin Theory program. Sonya Deville's been a heel. So the fact that WWE television said they're unprofessional, it's like, well, they can come back and be heels and say, yeah, we didn't care about the fans if they want to, or they can come back and say we weren't unprofessional, the company was, and feud with Sonya if they want. Like, there's so many ways they can go. And I think fans are smart enough now that they're going to have their opinions. Like, there's a really large Sasha Banks fan base that's going to cheer Sasha no matter what WWE says. And to be perfectly honest, I think she would be, again, probably not quite at that level, but she's in that Bryan Danielson category, Daniel Bryan, I guess, in WWE, that they can call her a B+ player and unprofessional all they want. Crowd's going to be rabid for Sasha because they love Sasha.
Do you remember anything from that time when Stone Cold left?
Very vaguely. And I believe, and again, it could be false memories at this point because it wasn't, a super significant thing in my life, but I do think that The Office, for lack of a different term, really did try to convince all of us that this was Steve being selfish. You know what I mean? And again, lesser at that point in time, but he was still the goose laying the golden egg, so to speak, as far as a draw. So I believe there was a bit of, we're all going to be hurt because Steve decided to go home. But I really believe that most of us agreed with him. Like, not the walking and taking his ball and going home, but it's like, they're going to do a cold Brock Lesnar, Steve Austin match. It's like, what? And especially because that was the era where pay-per-view was the money, where now it's like, doesn't matter if the match is on pay-per-view or TV, everybody makes the same amount of money. But it was like, everyone thought that was a ridiculous thing to book. So I think, everyone was in Steve's corner, especially because everybody liked Steve. But again, Steve said it, and I agree. And that's where, if this was creative differences, I don't agree with him walking out. It's like, by all means, put your foot down if you don't like it, but stay at the table.
Right. Going back a year, and I'm sorry if you've been asked these questions before. I've never had the chance to ask you them, and this is like the height of my fandom in college and whatnot. When you were told that you were going to be the first guy to quote unquote invade WWE, that you would kick this off, do you remember what your reaction was, and do you remember the circumstances around how you were told that you would have that honor?
I remember it, but it didn't feel like a big deal to me at the time, in that I knew moments before, practically. They were doing Raw in Calgary, and Johnny had called me and said, we've been flying all of the WCW talent to Stanford to meet you with Jim Ross and sort of get a welcome to WWE and, talk about your contract and what you're doing and everything. And it's like, we have TV in Calgary in 2 weeks. We're not going to fly you to Connecticut. Just go to the show and talk to Jim. Like, okay. So I only went to the show thinking I'm talking to Jim. So I went to the show and I'm hanging out and I'm talking to everybody. And some point in time in the afternoon, Johnny come up and it's like, oh, hey, you brought your gear, right? Because you're working tonight. And I thought he was kidding. I think he even said, it's like, yeah, screw you, Johnny. Good rib. And he's like, no, you are. And I still thought he was ribbing and walked away. And then later in the day, someone else who worked with WWE was like, all right, you got your segment nights, you got your gear. We're going to do this, right? And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you're running in tonight. And I'm like, oh, crap. And I had to go to my car and get my bag because I always have my gear with me.
Thank God.
And well, I could also, actually, I think I didn't have the gear they wanted, because at the end of WCW, I had black and red and they wanted the red and white. So I actually had to drive home and get the specific gear they wanted, but I'm like, 20 minutes from the Saddle Dome. So I didn't have a lot of advance notice. So it was, again, like hopping on the treadmill when it's already at, 7 miles an hour. It's like, crap. So it was just get it all done. And I remember, I don't know if nervous is the right word, but the way it was set up, like I'm just into the crowd, super kick him and run out. And there's no music, there's no introduction, there's nothing. I was like, what if they don't realize it's me in time to pop for the local guy? Because I hadn't wrestled in Calgary at that point since, I don't know, long time before that. So I'm like, if they don't realize it's me and don't realize I'm the hometown guy, it's like, what if I get a flat reaction? If I get a flat reaction on my debut, I'm dead here. So I was really nervous. And I remember I had my gear on. I had to put like janitor coveralls on, and then they snuck me up by the concession stands to stand there for a segment, with 2 security guards hiding me. And then when it was time for me to run in, I had to get the coveralls off and run in. And to my point that it was so quick, I had a buddy, he owned a gym here in town that I trained at. And I got tickets for him and his wife and his 2 little kids. Actually, he might have had 3 or 4 at that point in time. He's got lots of kids. And they were sitting, on the floor. And his kid dropped a toy, a soother or something. And he bent down to find it. He heard a really loud reaction and he looked up, didn't see anything, and looked at his wife and said, what did I miss? And she's like, you just missed Lance.
Oh, man.
He's like, what? She's like, yeah, he just ran in. And he missed it because he looked down. So it was that fast. But thankfully, the crowd popped like crazy and I was relieved. But yeah, I was concerned without the Titantron and the name and the announcement that I might not be recognized.
That whole time, that whole story felt like a layup. Like it felt like there's no way that this could fail. Ultimately, I don't know if it actually lived up to expectations. In your opinion, when did the wheels fall off that one? Because I mean, this was like every fan's dream, right? WCW invades WWF. You got some of the recognizable faces. Obviously, the Goldbergs and Stings of the world weren't there just yet. But in your opinion, from your perspective, where did it all kind of take a left turn?
I think the wheels completely fell off in, I guess it was Tacoma, not Seattle, but that Booker T, Buff Bagwell main event thing. I think that was the wheels fell off. But I think even before that, there was years of, WCW or the NWA against WWF, that dream, supercard invasion. And the first three were like me, Bill DeMott, and Stacy Keibler. Like, really? Like, I'd been there 10 months and was upper mid card. Bill DeMott had been there a while, but he was mid card. Stacy had been there less time than me. She won a Diva search, I think, when I was there, maybe before, but she wasn't there long and she wasn't an important figure. It's like, so right there, we're already half-assing it, for lack of a different term. So I think we were in the mud from the get-go. Like, I got a good reaction because it was Calgary, but if it was Flair or Bischoff or Sting or Goldberg, it's like the impact would have been significantly more. Even Booker, who they had, if Booker was the first one, it would have been more. But that horrible main event, and it was presented poorly too. Like, I think Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler basically apologized for the segment before they pitched to it. But that too, and it's always an interesting note, and I always joke about it with Jericho. The week before that Tacoma show, because we were doing house show loops for them, Booker and Buff did a house show loop and had bad matches. And the weekend before the Tacoma loop, I worked with Booker and had good matches. And Jericho told me that the production meeting on that Monday was a debate. Do we go with Storm Booker or do we go with Bagwell Booker? And all of the producers and the people that knew wrestling went, we got to go with Storm. It's going to be so much better. And Vince apparently was the deciding voice, with Buff is the more established, bigger name associated with WCW. And they went with Buff. And Buff didn't deliver. I was not that long ago, I watched it. It's like, he was blown up in a chin lock at like 90 seconds in. And at that point in time, and again, I believe it's been reported by, Meltzer and so forth, that after that show was when Vince panicked and changed direction. So that was definitely the wheels are off the cart.
I'm wondering, which chapter of your career do you look back on with the greatest fondness? ECW, WCW, or WWE? Because I feel like most people, maybe revisionist history would come into play. It'd be like, oh, WCW was a mess. The whole thing was kind of crumbling. Although I think that you were maybe one of the last great things that WCW did. I mean, they really got behind you and you really stepped up to the plate. ECW is where you kind of burst onto the scene on a national stage. And then, of course, WWE is the dream for everyone. But for you, is it possible that maybe you look back on the WCW run with the greatest fondness?
I've always been a body of work guy. Like, I don't like separating, because every chapter, whether it be, and again, I would put my Japan chapter up in that top 4 for sure. I look at all the chapters with great fondness, as well as some degree of frustration. Because there's always things you could do better. But WCW was, I think, that point where, at least in fans' eyes, I was established as, hey, this guy could actually like main event and be a big star on the national level. That, that short, brief push with the 3 titles that was just making so many waves and just like, holy crap. And there was a lot of fans that were like, oh, they should have put the world title on, which I don't agree with.
Why not?
But at that point in time, it's like, I've been in this company a month. What else is there to do? It's like, I wanted to be there for 5-10 years. And I think too, it's like Booker was just really hitting his stride. It's like, we don't need to cut Booker's legs off here. And I'm also a person that believes the world title should be on the biggest star, best guy in your company. And whatever date that was, it's like, Bill Goldberg was a bigger star than me. Booker T was a bigger star than me. Scott Steiner was a bigger star than me. It's like, I'm not ready to be that guy here. Now, I'd like to think I could have been at some point, but for me and the satisfaction for me, that match with Booker. Now, again, we got 6 minutes and a stupid angle, and it was, Russo-rific. But when I put Booker T in the half crab in that match, the crowd reacted like they believed I was actually going to beat Booker T and hold every single championship in this company, including the world title. And the fact that they reacted like, holy shit, this is going to happen, to me was that justification. What's the word I'm looking for? Validation.
Yeah.
Validation that this audience will accept me as a world champion. And so that was a real meaningful moment for me, even though, again, I didn't think I should be world champion. And again, I've had people, oh, WWE should have. It's like, are you kidding me? That, they had Rock, Austin, Hunter, Taker, Jericho. It's like, no, I should not have been world champion. But again, ECW was when I came into my own and actually became a performer. I was a great wrestler before ECW. ECW is when I found a character, a personality, really found myself. So that is a chapter that means a lot to me. WCW, I think, validated me as a potential top star. And then WWE was the big platform. So in that regard, it too was rewarding. But I think I didn't actually grow significantly as a performer in WWE. Like, there wasn't another milestone for me. So in that regard, it's not as rewarding.
I saw an interview with Eric Bischoff where he said that there was an idea that you would come in as his illegitimate son. Yes. Is that true? Was that brought to your attention?
Yeah. The first meeting when I had, I flew down to Atlanta to meet with Eric and Vince Russo, because they were in charge at the time. That was the Russo Bischoff regime.
Right.
And I met with them at a hotel in Atlanta to negotiate potentially coming in. And I sat with Eric first and discussed contract and business. And once we'd, basically hammered out a deal that he was going to send to the office to be approved, because he, at that point, wasn't allowed to approve money. So he had sent them. And then Eric got up and Vince sat down, because he was the creative end of it. And he's sitting there looking at me and he's like, the first idea off the top of my head, you could come in and do run-ins. And we're kind of wondering why you're, and it was to, Eric would be in trouble, but I'd run in and save him. We wouldn't know. And he said, and it would turn out that you're Eric Bischoff's illegitimate son. He says, because you have the same arrogant look on your face that he always has. And it's like, I haven't signed yet. And I'm like, the head of creative thinks I have an arrogant look on my face. And I'm looking at Bischoff and he's looking at me. And I'm like, okay. And because I like stuff to make sense. And I always think of things. So as soon as I think, my first thought is like, is Bischoff like 10 years older than me? It's like, how is he my dad?
Yeah.
And it turns out he's more than 10 years older than me. I thought he was younger than he was. I think he would have had to have a kid at like 15, but it's possible.
Right.
So I'm just like, okay. And that was all that was said. And then I went to the office to actually, get the contract and work out the details. And when I was home, I start coming with the backstory and how I can make this make sense. And I actually come up with one. But thankfully, they flew me to a Nitro before my debut just to take promotional photos and stuff. And I was backstage and Eric just walked by and he just, stopped me for a second. He says, just so you know, I kiboshed that illegitimate son thing. He says, that's dead. He's like, I'm already involved in too many angles. I don't need to be in another one. And I'm like, great. But again, the idea in my head is like, I've got a wrestling career. I didn't just debut now.
Right.
how would this not be known? So I come up with the idea that Eric, when he was a teenager, went to Banff, hooked up with a ski bunny once and left. And it was my mom. And he never knew she was even pregnant. And I never knew who my dad was. And it wasn't until I called my mom to say, hey, I've just signed with WCW. I've been hired by a new company. And she tuned in to watch Nitro for the first time and went, oh my God, that's the guy I hooked up with in Banff. He's your father. So at least it wouldn't contradict my entire wrestling career to that point, and why in 2000 I've discovered that Eric Bischoff is my dad.
I think the way it panned out was much better than that. Team Canada was great. Who came up, by the way, with "If I Could Be Serious for a Minute"?
I don't know for sure, because it wasn't an idea of, hey, this will be your thing.
Mm.
I won the US title, and they came up with the promo again, and again, it was probably Russo because it's a Swerve promo of come out and be all nice and talk about all the great people that have held this title. But if I can be serious for a minute, I deserve much better. And it was just a line. It was one sentence in a promo. But when I came back through the curtain, and again, I don't remember who it was, but I think there was more than one. Everybody says, oh, that was really great. We need to use that line every time now. And it was just someone had wrote it in the promo, because I don't think I ad-libbed the line. I think it was written, because they'd give me the promo and then I'd rewrite it and change it and make it my own voice. But I believe that line was written by someone. And just everyone, we need to use that all the time. And then it just became my thing. It wasn't a conscious plan to make it my thing.
Just want to ask you about a few more things. Are you a fan of the AEW? There's your pup. Hello. Is that Max?
That's Max, yeah.
All right. Hello, Max. Are you a fan of the AEW product? And if so, I'm just curious, have they exceeded your expectations in this short amount of time that they've been around? Like, they've obviously developed a great fan base. They've signed all these big guys. Did you think that they would be where they're at, when they launched just a few years ago?
I don't know if I speculated to have this is where I think they could go. I think it was just I hope this succeeds. So I don't know whether I had expectations. I am a fan of the product, like any product, not 100% of it. I don't think there's ever been a wrestling company I was 100% in support of, but on the whole, I greatly like the product. It feels like, even back when I was a fan, I liked the NWA, WCW over WWE's product. I liked that it was presented a little bit more like a sport. And I liked the fact that it felt more like we're in an arena watching wrestling rather than a big, 3-ring circus with the lights and the presentation. So AEW, I think, has always tried to be a little bit more reminiscent of the old product on TBS. So it appeals to me in that regard. And I've always liked wrestling. And that does seem to be the majority of the product. Like, I've always been a CM Punk fan, a Bryan Danielson fan. And I think too, even just the beginning, as someone who's seen so much wrestling and be a part of so much wrestling, the fact that when it started, there were a lot of new faces. You know what I mean? That when a Dante Martin jumps out at you, you're like, holy crap, that's really cool. And it's like, it has more refreshing moments like that, where, WWE has always sort of been you got to earn your stripes here. And by the time someone gets to a featured position, we've seen them a billion times, not every case, but mostly, where I find with AEW, you get a little bit more a surprise where, there's the criticism of, we saw Dante Martin with a bit of a push and he goes away, but you seem to always have someone who feels new and exciting. And then it also has, a more serious wrestling product, which again should surprise no one. A more serious wrestling product would appeal to me.
So considering that, just wondering, when you were kind of looking at the landscape, any conversations with them to go over there?
I reached out to Christopher Daniels and just said, hey, I'm interested in looking. But again, the first time WWE's offer came in quick and was really good, and I took it. And this time I was leaning towards Impact anyway, and they came back with an offer that I liked, so I never really talked to them. And this is too where my family and my time with my family is really important because I don't want to be divorced. That when I first looked at landscape, it's like that going every week, especially when you live in Calgary, clearing customs, all the connections that involve with living here. It's the worst place to live traveling wise for wrestling. Every week, it's like, well, if I go down, even if I only work Wednesday, it's like I have to leave on Tuesday, work Wednesday, come home on Thursday. It's like that's 3 days a week I'm gone every week. That's, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's, it's not too far below 50% of the time I'm gone. Impact, usually every other week. And it's like, well, if I leave on Friday, show Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday, it's like that's 4 days every 2 weeks. It's like that's a lot lighter schedule. So it works better for where I am in my real life. And again, the experience I had when I worked with Impact the first time, it's like I liked everybody. I liked the atmosphere. There's a really great team atmosphere. And that to me is the real big difference maker that I noticed between when I was in WWE. And not to bury WWE, they have the thing, and live TV is different. But when you're sitting on headset in WWE, it feels confrontational. And when you're sitting on headset in Impact, it feels collaborative. You've got the director who's asking, you've got Josh who's doing, but it all feels like we're all trying our best. And if something happens that doesn't go as perfectly as you want, it feels like we're all just going to try to figure out how we can make it better next time, rather than feeling like you've been pointed out and chastised for something. And it's just, atmosphere is so much more rewarding when it feels collaborative than confrontational. And I think my entire career, it's like pro wrestling is collaborative. And when I worked with Jerry Lynn, it was always just collaborative. And there's people in wrestling, when you work, it does feel confrontational because they're trying to get their shit in, and it's like, it's never as enjoyable. And in Impact, it just really feels like a collaborative effort. Certainly different, but similar to ECW, that it's like, we're just trying to move forward here and everybody's doing their best to do so. So when I had a chance to reflect on the respective atmospheres after having a cup of tea in both places and the difference in schedule, I'm like, you know what? It's like, I was really happy in Impact the short time I had. I'm just going to go back there and continue to be happy. Max, come here.
Just curious, how do you feel about them kind of teaming up with Owen Hart's family, where Owen Hart's legacy and his presence is not really felt anymore in WWE, and obviously that's a very sticky situation. It's very sensitive, but them kind of being with AEW for this tournament, how do you feel about that? Do you feel good about it?
I feel good about it. I have always, since day one, been in Martha Hart's camp.
Okay.
When fans get mad about, oh, she's not letting him be in the Hall of Fame, it's like, I don't care what you think. You're a fan. She's a widow. It's like her opinion trumps everybody else. Everybody else needs to shut the hell up. I've always felt that. So the fact that fans now get to celebrate Owen a bit more, I think is awesome. And since she's endorsing it and in favor of it, I think it's awesome. Like, I just don't, I find fans were way too selfish wanting what they wanted over what the widow wanted. And I'm like, that's not how life works. It's like, if I go to the hospital, my wife makes life altering decisions for me. That's just the way it works. She's next in line. And when Owen passed away, it's like, Martha is in charge here. We all need to respect Martha. And now that she's comfortable enough to allow Owen's name to be out there and used in wrestling, as long as she's happy, I'm happy. And the fact that we get to hear and say the name Owen Hart on a wrestling show, I think is fantastic.
Couldn't agree more. I'm happy we agree on that. Just two last quick things, and I hate to end on somewhat of a sour note, but the last question won't be. One thing that I really appreciate about you, especially on your Instagram, is and it's not a great thing, but more often than not. In fact, just as an aside, my first job in television, and you'll see where I'm going here. I worked at HBO Sports. I was an intern in 2003. I was a junior in college going on my senior year, and I was sitting in the intern room, and someone walked in, and they popped in a tape with pro wrestling on it, and HBO didn't cover pro wrestling at all. So I was like, "Hey, why are you guys watching pro wrestling?" And they said that they were doing a story. I don't know if you're familiar with the show Real Sports with Brian Gumbel, kind of like a 60 minutes of sports. They were doing a story on wrestlers dying young, and they were talking to Rowdy Piper, and they had a very famous interview with Vince McMahon where he hit Armin Katane's papers out of his hands when he got all. Anyway, every time, so this has been, and I got to work on the story, and so it was a really, rewarding experience. And every time it seems like someone who you worked with, who you knew, someone who was someone in the wrestling business passed away, you don't just post a picture of them on your Instagram. Like, you write something very heartfelt, going back to the website. And I'm just wondering, because you've been around the business for so long, was there ever a point where one of these tragedies, occurred and you just said, I just don't want to be a part of this anymore? Did it ever affect you to the point where you really just wanted to, and you've seen a lot of stuff, right? And it's been tough the last 20 years or so, to the point where you wanted to walk away?
Never walk away, but there was definitely a period where my initial emotion was anger, not sadness,
Mm.
that it continues to happen. But I find writing those tribute commentaries, I call them, they're almost a eulogy to an extent. I find them really therapeutic. Like, it's a chance for me to let out all of that emotion. So if it's someone, especially that I had, interacted with, really like a friendship or a bond with, it's like, I almost have to, like, I need to let this out. And I've found early on that it's really therapeutic for me to vent your grief or whatever. And it's turned into, again, I've only had to do it twice so far, again, touch wood, but my mom, who used to always read my website, it's like she really thought that many of these were really good. So when my grandfather passed, she's like, you need to do the eulogy. She says, I can't. She wouldn't get through it. And when my stepdad died, it's like I was asked to do the eulogy. And it's like, this is a lot of pressure. And thankfully, I think I did a really great job on both. My stepdad, man, I struggled. And it was like the last minute that I hit the line. Okay, this is it. And I managed to do it. And I think it's just therapeutic. And I think because, again, especially with many of the deaths being drug related, it's like, it's both good and hard because I'm so not a part of that culture.
Mm.
And I was always the guy that wasn't a part of that. So I think that's where the anger comes from, because I can't understand addiction and what some of these people go through. But it's my way of remembering it. I know there was one I got a lot of flack for, the Balls Mahoney one, because I talked about how I didn't like working with him. We didn't really get along all that well because he was just more outgoing and friendly than me. And people thought I was speaking ill of the dead. And I'm like, this is just my memory of the guy I knew. And it's like, this is how I honestly feel. And it's like, you're welcome to feel how you want, but these are my true thoughts. And I try to be as true as I can with them. And hopefully I don't have to write as many of them anymore.
Right. Yes. Well, I do, and I agree 100%. Don't want to see them, but I appreciate them. Last one, and I feel like you're one of the best people to ask this question to. I do some work for BT Sport, which is the UK broadcaster for WWE. And around Mania time, they asked me to rank my favorite WrestleManias, top 10. And I put as number one, and it was a no-brainer. This was the easiest one. I put WrestleMania 4 as my favorite WrestleMania of all time because I loved the tournament, and it was also the event that made me fall in love with Bret Hart. Bret Hart, my favorite of all time. I adored him as a kid. My favorite athlete when I was growing up. A little kid, like, I adored Bret Hart, right? Like so many Canadian kids. And as you may recall, he was in that battle royal and Bad News Brown turns on him. And I felt something about that. And that's what made me fall in love with him and, get emotionally invested in his story. You went to WrestleMania 4. You were there. You went to 4 and 5. You went on a road trip with your buddies.
And 6.
And 6. Wow. Well, that one makes sense because it was in Canada, but tremendous run for you. Am I wrong about 4? Because I thought it was great. I loved the tournament. It was fun.
Well, you can't be wrong if it's your favorite.
Sure, but people killed me for it. They killed me.
Well,
They said, "There's no way this was a horrible one."
I was probably one of those.
Ah,
But I think that's typical of fans. It's like it's the moment that grasps you. It's like everybody thinks the wrestling they watched as a kid was the greatest wrestling
right.
because that's. But yeah, like if you look at it with a brain rather than your heart, like there's a lot of 4-minute shitty matches.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And again, the fact that I went there, hoping to see Savage Steamboat 2, you know what I mean? And then you get Savage Greg Valentine or something, and it's just like, wow. So like I think me personally, and I would have been older than you at that point, I thought it was let down. Like I loved 5. Like I remember leaving 5 thinking it's like that might be better than 3. And I loved 5. But again, it's wrestling, right? It's whatever you fell in love with and why. It doesn't have to technically be good if that's what you like. But yeah, I thought 4 was a lot of really short, not particularly great matches.
I guess
But
I just liked
again,
the tournament. The tournament was fun.
Yeah, like I was excited about it, and I loved being there. But again, I remember being disappointed with a lot of matches, where with 5, I remember thinking there was a lot of really great matches.
Is 5 your favorite ever?
I haven't even seen them all.
Right. So, you haven't? Wow.
No. I haven't. I still haven't seen the Brock beat Taker. I haven't watched that show.
Really?
Yeah. I've again, busy in the fact of going back. I started again to keep my commentaries going for a while. I started watching the old Manias from 1 up, but it's like I got into the high 20s and then got busy again. So
that is amazing.
Yeah, there's been a few that I haven't seen, but again, to me, the one that will always be special is 3, because that was again when I started to be a fan. Like I became a fan, I think a smidgen before 2, but I didn't have a lot of access to it. Where 3 was the one that I was a fan when the hype started coming. And so it's like I was into that whole build where I think I saw like one Saturday Night Main Event and then I would have saw WrestleMania 2. So I was just starting to be a fan. But 3, I was into the, everybody and then the build. And then 3 was just this iconic, the 93,173 fans. And the fact that you remember the number, even though it's, it's BS, but it's the number that will stick in your head. And it also kills me as a fan that had I thought it possible to go, I could have went.
Right.
You know what I mean? We went so much further for 4 when we could have actually went to 3.
Well, I could pepper you with questions all day. We'll leave it at that. I also have always appreciated that you're somewhat of an MMA fan as well, proving that, you could be a fan of both and that both worlds can come together in harmony.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I started following MMA regularly when Brock was there. And then when it was like one show a month, it's like, I'm watching this. And I was a full-time MMA fan, the first true sport I was ever a fan of. And then they just started getting too many shows and too many shows. And I stopped watching because it got to the point where if I'm watching a show every single weekend, I don't see my wife that much. And I stopped being a fan. Well, sitting up in my room in isolation for a week, recovering from COVID, I ended up scrolling through Facebook and realizing that I'm stopping and watching all the MMA fights.
Really?
And I watched so much MMA.
Wow.
Because I got nothing to do, right? I'm in isolation. I can't spend time with my wife. I don't want to give her COVID. And I realized how much I actually enjoy watching MMA, and I really kind of missed it.
Wow. Anything in particular catch your eye? Any fighter?
Oh, I was watching older stuff. So I'm I'm watching, Crow Cop, matches in Pride. I'm watching, some Anderson Silva fights. And it was just anything that I recognized a guy in particular and didn't remember the finish.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
You're going to start watching again weekly?
I'd
love to have you.
It's
a lot. It's 7 hours every Saturday. Who has the time?
I'm still trying to keep up with the wrestling shows because it's part of my job, and I would like to, and I may try to sneak a few more of them in because I did really enjoy it.
Well, maybe the pay-per-views once a month. There's another one coming up on June 11th, which is a solid one. So I would recommend perhaps starting with that. That's in Singapore. Again, Lance, longtime admirer of yours, big fan. Thank you for everything that you've done representing Canada, but just, the website, the access. You've just been someone that was really, really easy to root for over the years. And I'm really happy that you're back now with Impact. I know some people who work there as well. And I think, what you say about the family atmosphere and just how it's kind of like the little engine that could kind of meshes with your personality very well and what you're all about. So thank you for the time. All the best to you. Keep up the great work. And hopefully we can do this again in the future and maybe talk about MMA when you're back fully in the MMA world.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Ariel Helwani Show. If you want to check out some of our old episodes, or if you want to stay up to date with all the great things that we are doing here, please do like and subscribe to this here page. Trust me, some really cool things are coming up.